start with, Gideon. And I'm going to position it in two ways. The first one for me is there are two lenses through which one can look at the partnership with Japan through TICAD. The first one is the technical programmatic lens, which we've just presented now. And I think the detail of which in terms of what has happened and the programs, etc., is very clear in terms of what we've done. The second one, which I think we should look at it from, is the political partnering or the political engagement between Africa and the rest of the world, and in the context of this relationship between Africa and Japan. That's the overarching frame. So what I would choose to do is to focus on the political partnering more than anything else, because, as I said, the first element has been dealt with quite heavily in the presentation. And one of the key principles around how we partner and how we work between ourselves as the continent and Japan through TICAD and other mechanisms that we have is we've got this
recording in progress.
This principle and this value of honesty in how we engage with one another. And I'm then going to leverage on that in relation to it. I'm seeing a 1 minute there, and I haven't even started with my response. But I'll move with my thought process, and I'll ignore that 1 minute over there because I think it's an important discussion. So I think there are firstly two challenges to partnering with Africa. The first one is entering the partnership with Africa by seeing Africa as a continent that needs help. And when you enter and you engage with Africa, you're here to help Africa and Africans to get themselves out of poverty. And so it becomes a paternalistic relationship or engagement between the continent and whoever is coming outside of the continent to support our developmental efforts. That's the first lens to which partnerships often happen. The second one is where we see the continent as a market for goods that are coming from the outside and merely wants to utilize the wealth of the continent in terms of its population size, etc., to expand the market for the goods that are deriving from outside the continent. And linked to that is also seeing Africa as a source of inputs, whether it's raw materials and all of these other things. Both of those, I think, are problematic. And what we need to do, and historically, I think what we've tried to address in how we partner with the rest of the world, is finding a comfortable position that negates both of those and really sees Africa as a continent in its own right that has got its own developmental aspirations as it has defined. And I think the work that we're doing in relation to Agenda 2063 is critical to that, because we are setting the agenda and we're saying to the world, this is how we define our pathways to development and this is how you're going to help. Now, having contextualized that, I think it's important then to say, what is the starting point of what we are trying to address? And I think there are two issues. I think one is appreciating Africa's historical insertion both in the global value chains, where Africa is located, but also Africa's insertion in the international governance system of the world. So when we seek to partner, we want to invert those realities for Africa. We want to invert how Africa is inserted into the global value chains that defines how the global economy functions. And secondly, we want to create an international system of governance that is fair to Africa. So what does that concretely mean? What are we inverting? And what are we inverting it to? One, I think it's about building industrial capacity. Is absolutely critical for us as a continent. Two, I think it's about shifting trade patterns as well. Trade patterns, I'm going to close maybe in 1 minute. Trade patterns are important to shift because they reflect the transformation in how Africa engages with the world, and it's not just a receiver of goods and services, but it also exports to the rest of the world. Now, between 1993 and 2003, the question that we need to ask ourselves in relation to TCAD and all of these other partnerships that we have is whether or not the 30 years has seen a transformation of those realities for Africa. The concrete answer is no, it hasn't. South Africa is still inserted in the same way that it has been inserted historically in global value chains. The international financial system still doesn't work for Africa, etc., etc. It hasn't, so the question that we must ask is why and how at a political level TCAD can assist us to address those issues. For me, that's the fundamental impact that we wanted to see through the TCAD process. Thanks.